After a day dominated by an NHS story Boris Johnson didn't want in the headlines, the Conservatives and their allies have been blasting back. A secretly recorded phone conversation with Labour's health spokesman suddenly appeared, following last night's flood of fake tweets suggesting the story of the 4-year-old treated on a hospital floor was itself a fake.
We have a Prime Minister who hides the truth when it's put in front of him in a picture, takes the mobile phone off somebody and sticks it in their pocket. Well, these are, yes, they're uncomfortable pictures, but I thank those papers for printing those uncomfortable pictures. I do not blame the nurses, I do not blame the doctors, I do not blame the health service. I blame a government that has underfunded our NHS as the cause of the problem.
Before those words in Carlisle, Jeremy Corbyn was in Bolton, where the main hospital is on black alert or full capacity.
What's happening here in this town itself, the black alert on the hospital itself, because of the insufficiency of funding and the insufficiency of supplies to our NHS. That has to change.
Labour's health spokesman, Jonathan Ashworth, scaled back his media commitments after a secretly recorded phone conversation was released, showing him tell an old Conservative friend that Labour was losing the election, in no small part thanks to Jeremy Corbyn.
I mean, I've been going around these national places. It's dire for Labour. It's dire. It's awful for them. And it's the combination of Corbyn and Brexit.
I was trying to sort of wind him up, because he's a Tory who I've always had a bit of joshing with over the years, and trying to get him to sort of lull him into a false sense of security, like sort of trying to psych him out. But clearly, it's, I look stupid now. But the key thing is, why has this come out today? It's because the Tories know that the NHS is in crisis.
Back at the JCB factory in Staffordshire, Boris Johnson was gleefully quoting the helpfully timed release of Jonathan Ashworth's private thoughts.
And it's clear from what John Ashworth has said today that Labour intends to block Brexit if they possibly can. Let's move this thing forward.
Boris Johnson was attacked for his earlier campaign intervention after the London Bridge killings. The father of Jack Merritt, who was killed by Isman Khan last month, said that Boris Johnson's response had been undignified, using the attack for political gain in a way his son would not have wanted.
Instead of seeing a tragedy, Boris Johnson saw an opportunity, and he went on the offensive. He saw an opportunity to score some points in the election. He immediately said, "Oh, this is Labour's fault. They allowed this to happen. They had this early release policy and so on." And at that point, it was just, well, I had to say something. There was no reference to us, there was no attempt to contact us and discuss this with us or with anybody else, as far as I know.
Campaigning in Bath, the Lib Dems leader accused Boris Johnson of dog whistle politics, denigrating EU citizens who live here.
So you know what you get from the Liberal Democrats on Brexit, to remain in the European Union and to stand up for liberal values. And what do we get from the Prime Minister? It's absolutely clear. We get lie after lie after lie.
He's still got 48 hours to persuade me. He's got 48 hours to persuade me that he genuinely wants a clean Brexit, and he would persuade many people who voted Brexit Party back in May the same. So there is still time. But it's difficult when someone flips and flops to this degree.
A strange rallying cry for the end of a very strange election. Brexit the trigger, but not a much examined matter over 5 weeks of campaigning.
Our political editor Gary Gibbon reporting there. Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Sarah Wollaston, who was a Conservative MP and is now a Liberal Democrat. She was the chair of the Commons Health and Social Care Committee from 2014 to 2019. Thanks for coming on the programme, Dr. Wollaston. Tell me, when Boris Johnson's trying to change the conversation with his bulldozer away from the NHS and the government's record with the NHS, is that working?
No, it's not. I think people are seeing right through that, and they're also seeing that the waiting times in A&E are now worse. The worst they've been since 2004, since they started recording these things. And so that's why we're having these terrible stories like that have been emerging over the last few days. And he can take reporters' phones away all he likes. The public can see it, and they can see the worsening performance across the NHS and the terrible pressure that staff are under, and they expect better.
OK, but could they have expected better from you as well? You were a Tory MP for all these years. You got elected in 2010. You were chair of the Health and Social Care Committee from 2014 to 2019. Could you and your party have done much more for the NHS?
They could and should, and they should have been much more transparent about the figures as well, and that's something that the Health and Social Care Select Committee, which is a cross-party group of MPs, was constantly pointing out. And I think that's what we're seeing with this administration, is that they have been unrealistic about the figures as well. They're not being straight with people about just how bad things have got over the years, and I think there's a combination of things that need to change. It's not just about money, it's about the workforce, it's about the pressures within social care and the knock-on effect of that, and also the underfunding in buildings and equipment, which then has a knock-on effect on performance times, for example, for operations. And all this is going to get a lot worse. What we saw yesterday was Boris Johnson trying to deflect away from the story about Jack being left on a floor in a hospital by talking about getting Brexit done, when in fact the reality is that the Health and Social Care Select Committee heard week in, week out about how there's no version of Brexit that will help our NHS and social care. It will get a lot worse if he does get Brexit done, because of the effect on the EU workforce and funding and many other pressures.
Right. But all the big parties, all the parties, in fact, are making extraordinary promises in terms of funding for the NHS. Are any of them actually realistic, including your own?
Well, we've actually been honest with people that we are going to have to be prepared to pay more. So we've said this is so important that we need to put a penny on income tax to fund, to help relieve the immediate pressures in health and social care. But we're also saying that we don't want a massive reorganisation, because within the Labour manifesto, and I'm surprised this hasn't had more attention, they are proposing an extraordinary top-down reorganisation, when in fact the NHS itself has come up with a set of proposals that would solve many of the issues that the NHS faces without a major reorganisation. So I think that the Liberal Democrat manifesto is backing the NHS's own proposals. It does come up with real extra resource, but also highlights how that will be raised. So I think, yes, it is very realistic, and prioritises social care as well as the NHS.
Right. OK, but very briefly, Brexit does seem to be dominating this campaign more than the NHS, and that's what's good for Boris Johnson at the moment. Briefly.
But the point is that Brexit will have a terrible effect on the NHS as well, and that's what's so disingenuous. The idea that you get Brexit done, it won't get Brexit done, and it absolutely won't help the NHS. It will make things a lot worse for the NHS, for public health, for social care, and for science and research. And so when people go to the polls on Thursday, they should bear in mind that getting Brexit done will make their health service worse.
OK, got to leave it there. Dr. Sarah Wollaston, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. More from here and me and Stoke later, but now to John in London. John.
Thank you, Matt. Well, joining us now from Birmingham is junior Dr. Andrew Myerson, who says he's witnessed firsthand the pressures that the NHS is under. I'll also be talking to a consultant oncologist, Professor Gus Dalgleish from South London. First, Dr. Myerson. Dr. Myerson, 5,500 deaths on trolleys, people waiting to get into hospital. Why, in view, is this happening, in your view?
Well, it's a terrible situation that's happening, and it's happening in A&E departments all across the country. It was just reported today that Dennis Campbell in the Guardian reported that 5,500 people in the last few years have died as a result of the policies of the Tory party, of this government, of Boris Johnson, of Theresa May, David Cameron, Jeremy Hunt. It is devastating to our NHS, and I see what it's like in there every day, and people are dying. 5,500 people is nearly double the amount of people who have been killed in the United Kingdom since 1970 by terrorism. This is an enormous number, and we should all be outraged.
Well, now, obviously, we don't have elections in the midwinter, and midwinter is a bad time for getting people queuing up, going into hospitals.
Absolutely.
I mean, isn't this actually part of the normal difficulties that occur in midwinter?
No, it's absolutely not. If you look at the latest evidence from the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, you'll see that NHS waiting times are the absolute worst in history. It is getting progressively worse over the last 10 years, and we are at a crisis point right now. It is the absolute worst in NHS history. Cancer rates are absolutely terrible. We can't get enough people into hospital. We can't get enough people out of hospital because we don't have enough beds. We have an enormous crisis in our A&Es nationwide, and this government is doing nothing about it.
But is this about money, or is it actually simply about organization?
No, it is not about organization. This is about a deliberate policy of this government of the last 10 years to underfund all of our hospitals to such a degree that we can't operate anymore. We can't function, and 5,500 people will not be at the Christmas table this year because of the policies of this government. It is that serious, and I want to be very clear with this. I'm a junior doctor at Worcestershire Royal Hospital, and I love Worcester. I love my hospital. It is a great hospital, and the people of Worcester should know that it is a safe hospital. Once we get you inside, we will give you world-class care. But the problem is that when too many ambulances are queuing out in front, and this happens at hospitals all across the country, we can't get enough people in because we don't have the beds, we don't have the staff, and we don't have the social care to get people discharged appropriately to places outside of hospital.
Dr. Myerson, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, in a statement, the Worcestershire Royal Hospital said, "We do know that on the night in question where you witnessed a death, there were a number of ambulances waiting longer than we would want outside. We're taking positive action to tackle this. We do recognise there is more that we need to do." Now joining us is Professor Dalgleish. Professor Dalgleish, what is your view of what the problem is?
Well, I don't disagree with anything that you've heard there, but what I'd make it very clear is all this stems from the law of unintended consequences of disastrous decisions by Labour Party when they were in power. Tony Blair gave us a new doctor's contract, and this allowed GPs not to do after hours or weekends, and this was a disastrous destruction of the GP service, which led to lots of patients having no other option but to go to the A&E and put extra drains on it. The other things that the Labour government have done was embrace the private finance initiative, borrow £12 billion to build new hospitals and services, in which we have to pay back over £97 billion in 20 years. And this is the reason why my hospital and other hospitals cannot ever be in the black. They're always in the red because of the enormous sums of money we have to pay back under those disastrous decisions by Gordon Brown.
But Dr. Dalgleish, forgive me, the Conservatives have been in power for 10 years. Have you not managed to get a single medical minister to respond to your concerns and change this state of affairs?
I must say I have tried very, very hard, and I have been given hearings, but I do not see much improvement on it, because the bottom line is it will require an incredible, massive structural change of the NHS. You can throw as much money at it as you like, and it will make very little difference. We actually have 100,000 positions in the NHS unfilled, 40,000 nurses, 10,000 GPs, 40,000 consultants. These are all fully funded.
But you're a doctor, sir. You're a doctor. You have to repair patients. You have to find a way through. How is it that for 10 years it's defeated the Conservative Party, and you say that before that it defeated the Labour Party? Are you saying that, in fact, the NHS is unmanageable?
No, it is, in the current structure it's unmanageable, and it has to be reformed. The crumbling pillars which I actually put forward, the private finance initiative, the purchaser-provider split, the dreadful problems we have with litigation, and the fact that we have a manager-led service with doctors told what to do. It should be a clinical-led service with a very good administration to make sure we can deliver that, and that is the reason we have so many doctor positions unfilled, so many nursing positions unfilled.
Very briefly, you started this out as a political issue, blaming the Labour Party and then blaming the Conservative Party. I mean, surely this is a revenue-neutral crisis.
I don't fully understand what you mean.
Well, I mean, you wanted to blame
crisis.
one party, then you blame the other, but you have no solution.
Well, obviously the health service requires more money thrown at it each year. But what I'm saying is the major problems that the NHS has been coping with were initiated by the Labour Party, and I'm challenging the fact that they're the only party who can look after the NHS. Well, they're the only party that have inflicted terminal wounds to it.
Dr. Dalgleish, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And indeed, thank you very much indeed, Andrew Myerson. Thank you. It didn't take long for Boris Johnson's bizarre TV interview over the sick four-year-old to go viral yesterday. But within hours, a very different take was fizzing across social media sites. People started sharing a claim purporting to be from a senior nurse that the picture of the child on the blankets on the floor was not what it seemed. This counter-narrative was soon picked up and shared by conservative-leading columnists. But who was behind it? Simon Brown trying to find out.
With just days to go until the election, Target's Voter digs into the claims and counterclaims that have littered social media as political parties scramble to control the debate. Yesterday, the Tories were on the back foot over this photo of a 4-year-old boy sleeping on the floor of Leeds General Infirmary.
This is a 4-year-old boy, Prime Minister, suspected of pneumonia, forced to lie on the floor on a pile of coats. You refuse to look at the photo. You've taken my phone, put it in your pocket, Prime Minister. His mother says the NHS is in crisis. What's your response to that?
I'm sorry. It's a terrible, terrible photo, and I apologise, obviously, to the families and all those who have terrible experiences in the NHS.
But soon, another story started dominating social media. Allegations that the Health Secretary's special advisor had been punched by an angry Labour mob, bussed in by the party. The claims were repeated online by prominent journalists, then retracted when this video emerged of what really happened.
These people have devastated our country!
There was no punch.
I pointed my hand at you, walked into it.
But quickly the social media story moved back to the little boy in the hospital. Except this time it was being claimed the boy's mother faked the picture. A message circulates claiming to have a friend at Leeds Hospital insisting the incident was a left-wing propaganda story. The exact same unverified message was replicated by thousands of Twitter and Facebook accounts. A Facebook account appears to be one of the first to have posted the message that has been widely shared, including by pro-Brexit groups. But in another twist, its owner claims that her account was hacked and it was not her who wrote it. A version of the post is retweeted by Alison Pearson, a prominent columnist, and amplified exponentially, according to analysis by the academic Mark Owen Jones. Alison Pearson said she'll publish an explanation tomorrow as to why the photo is 100% fake. This tweet has since been deleted. So is the photo real? The Yorkshire Post, who first published the photo, say Sarah, the boy's mother, sent it to them. The paper's editor says they spoke to the hospital and they confirmed what happened. The saga shows how social media again is proving to be a murky battleground in British politics, and at the centre of it, a 4-year-old boy.